Hi, Lionesses. This is Bobby Carlton. I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief of Lioness magazine, as well as the founder of Innovation Women. Today, I am talking with Sherry Handel. She is the executive director at Additive Manufacturer Green Trade Association, or as we like to call it, AMGTA. So the association was founded in November 2019 to promote the green benefits of the additive manufacturing world. So welcome, Sherry. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Bobby. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk about additive manufacturing. Like, what is it, and what are we talking about when we say additive manufacturing? And I'd also love it if you can tell our audience a little bit about why we say additive manufacturing versus what I think more people are familiar with, which is the words 3D printing.
Yes, that is definitely a great question. Additive manufacturing or 3D printing really allows you to create a physical three-dimensional object directly from a digital 3D or CAD computer-aided design file. So additive manufacturing is a process used to create a part or product by layering materials one over the next to actually create this three-dimensional product.
Okay.
So materials used include metal powders, polymers, ceramics, concrete, and other materials, which is really exciting. And unlike subtractive manufacturing, that creates its final product by cutting away a block into the actual end use part or product. With additive, the material is added layer upon layer, so there's much less waste in the process. And really, 3D printing is typically used as the term for the maker community. Consumers use that term more commonly, whereas in the industrial side, businesses like to describe large-scale production of additive by using the term additive manufacturing. So additive manufacturing is really just basically 3D printing on an industrial scale.
Got it. Okay. So additive manufacturing is growing at an incredible rate. Why is it growing so quickly?
Well, several reasons. It enhances the functionality of parts and products. It enables local manufacturing, and it significantly reduces time to market. Those are the biggest reasons. And also, it's revolutioning the design and manufacturing process. And the cost of machines has dropped so much, as a result, adoption has increased. So we've got 5 big industries that are really taking advantage of the unique capabilities of additive manufacturing, and they have really been transformed. That's aerospace, medical, automotive, and trains too, energy, and consumer products.
Gotcha. So
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to mention the Wohlers report, which is like the industry trade report that comes out every year. And despite the global pandemic, the industry grew last year about 7.5% and generated about 12.8 billion in revenue. But this is different than prior years where the average growth rate was 27.4% over the previous decade. But still, it's still growth. It's a lot higher than some other industries. And I think we're going to make a big comeback as we get through the pandemic.
Gotcha. So some members of our audience might be working on the creation of physical products.
Yeah.
And what should they know or consider when they're thinking about manufacturing options like additive?
Well, additive gives entrepreneurs and startups the ability to bring a new product to market faster. They can iterate, change, and recraft it as needed through the rapid prototyping process. And it gives them a more cost-effective advantage over their competition, which is always key. You know, first to market is a big advantage in the startup world, and additive helps you get there quicker. And rapid prototyping, I mentioned, is really, the term 3D printing is used a lot in rapid prototyping because it's not industrial scale, but it's really a highly automated process that enables designers to quickly modify, as I mentioned, a product, and that gives you the ability to test it and evaluate it to get it to the point you want it to be. And there's various stages of prototyping, but it could be used for crowdfunding platforms to raise money. It can be used for pitch competitions, investor presentations. So there's some distinct advantages to the technology. And there's so many technologies within the 3D printing additive world, really, quite a bit with both polymers and metals and other materials.
Gotcha. So are there specific challenges we need to look out for when we're doing additive?
Yeah, in the design and engineering side, it's a big difference designing for additive manufacturing, DFAM, which is an industry term that I learned early on when I started in this career. So the technology offers engineers and designers a lot more freedom in how they actually create an additive product or part and how they're designed. So the optimizing designs for the complex geometries, lattice structures, lightweight components is so much different because you can do so much more. So this mindset, when you come from a traditional manufacturing background, is quite different because there's so many restrictions in conventional manufacturing and how you do things. With additive, it's a lot more open. So when you look at the complexity, minimizing material waste, cost-effective customization, it's truly another world. And you can also consolidate parts. So there's this study that we recently did last November. And in the study, we showed a GE engine that originally had, I believe it was 422 parts. Additive manufacturing reduced it to just 12 parts. So there's a traditional method that has a lot more cost built in where you need dies and tooling, et cetera, and all this upfront stuff that needs to be done. Whereas in additive, you can eliminate a lot, and you can also streamline things so assembly becomes much more quicker, and hence costs are reduced significantly.
Oh, that's a great point in terms of, with additive, you might be able to get rid of the whole prototyping process, right?
Well, you
or not prototype, die tool.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Right. I know what you meant. That's not what you meant.
Yeah. Well, I know with a lot of the startups and entrepreneurs that I talk to, the creation of molds and dies and things like that is really prohibitive. Once they have those parts, they're like, okay, I'm good to go. But, the creation of the molds alone can add a considerable expense. And if you could bypass that by, going straight to additive, I think that would be great.
Absolutely. And with once the molds are made and then you want to make a change, you're like, okay, we did some product evaluation, we did some focus groups or whatever it is that you're doing to really fine tune it for your market, or maybe unexpectedly have to fine tune it, probably in this case. You've got to start all over with it, the tooling.
Yeah.
And with additive, it's just a tweak on a computer, update that CAD file, and then you're ready to go.
Nice. So the pandemic, I feel like, has introduced many people to the concept of 3D printing. As the world needed face shields and ventilators, like the whole concept of instant manufacturing came into focus. I know that some people were even using their home tools to create devices specifically to address pandemic needs. How did that whole thing impact your organization?
Well, it created a tremendous amount of awareness, which you touched on. It made more people aware of what 3D printing actually is and what it's capable of doing, enabling that local production to meet the local hospital's needs, the local healthcare facilities within your city, town, state, country, and of course, worldwide. There are people producing here in the United States for other countries as well. So it just really opened the door for people to really see the potential and the advantages. But the other thing is, while now many people now know what 3D printing is, they still may not be aware of the term additive manufacturing, which is really 3D printing on an industrial scale. And while the additive machine manufacturers have seen a decline in sales due to the pandemic in a big way, Other companies in the AM industry have seen an increase in sales, like the service bureaus. They've had about a 7.5% increase over last year. And a lot of that new business was due to the pandemic. So it's like this, silver lining, if you even want to say that when you're talking about a global pandemic. But, there's some good that did come out of it, is that we have learned how to mitigate these global supply chains in a better way. We've learned how, when you're producing medical spec PPE, it's great to do it, and to offer it, but specifications have to be met. And how do you take all these great people that want to do work and provide their services and to support the cause to save lives when, you've got these specifications that do need to be met in order for them to be accepted and actually used. So a lot of organizations stepped up and tried to figure that out, excuse me, and tried to harness this community out there that wanted to make a difference and to communicate with them and interface with the medical community and the healthcare community to make that happen.
Yeah, I know a doctor actually at a hospital in Florida who was creating at home nasal swabs on her 3D printer and, working with a design that was created someplace else. So, feels like a lot of medical people were also introduced to 3D printing in terms of what it could do for them at the hospitals.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's some hospitals are even installing and have been on the medical implant side of the business, medical device side, 3D printers, and it's really exciting to see now more hospitals are aware of what can be done, and they're starting to adopt the technology as well and trying to figure out how to bring in the right people to operate it and how to best interface with the medical professionals to get the materials produced that they need.
Yeah. So why is the additive manufacturing industry so focused on green or environmental aspects? I mean, it sounds like it's the whole focus for your organization.
Right. Well, until recently, the AM industry did not, for the most part, recognize the environmental benefits of AM or additive manufacturing. We also call it AM, not to confuse things. So if I say AM all the time, I just want to make sure you know what I'm talking about because it's so commonly used. So as Brian Neff, the founder of the AMGTA, says, often with additive manufacturing, people focus on the costs and the time savings of the technology without really considering the very real environmental benefits versus traditional manufacturing. And these include improved end use, utility of parts that are produced, and for example, like in aviation, the lightweighting of a part that goes into aircraft, but also the improved industrial ecology of the manufacturing process itself. So when you think of like traditional manufacturing, you think of, when you look at foundries and casting, they're very dirty and polluting technologies. Whereas in additive, you've got like an operating room environment. It's very clean and temperature controlled, and dust is at an absolute minimum, if at all, because of all the protocols in place to protect the equipment and the end product from any contamination.
Neat. So you're going to be celebrating your first year and a half with the group. How does your background fit into this, and what kind of experiences did you bring to the table?
Well, I was completely new to the additive industry. I came from an entrepreneurial background. I created 3 different startups, two as sole founder, one as co-founder. And my most recent startup was a tech startup based out of Boston, and that's how I met you. So then I brought in this nonprofit background as well. So when I heard about the opportunity, I thought it was really exciting because I knew in the startup world how 3D printing was used in the startup space, and had some knowledge about low volume 3D printing. And I also knew that the AM industry was certainly growing quite a bit and scaling at 25% annually. And so that was super attractive to me because here's this opportunity to build something from nothing and to actually use a lot of the skills and talents that you develop as an entrepreneur, because you don't have any one job. You're doing marketing, you're doing, from accounting to outreach, business development, networking, it just goes on and on and on. So I enjoy working in that type of environment where I have a lot of flexibility and freedom to explore different ideas and to try new things and to get things going. And so that was really, I think, why this worked out so well, because I've been able to be adept and flexible. And like any entrepreneur knows, something doesn't work, you try something else, and you want to go from A to B. How do you get there? Well, that's the entrepreneurial mindset. You figure it out. And I think that's a big reason that this has been such a good fit for me.
So with a lot of associations, like one of the primary benefits is bringing people together and the ability to get together and meet others in an industry. And you've got a relatively new organization. How are you handling COVID in terms of these get-togethers and meets?
Sure. Well, I was slated to speak at 3 big industrial events last year. Really exciting, first time to meet people in the industry and to connect and actually, let people know about the organization. So instead, all those events got canceled, as you know. So I came on board late February, and like within a week, the next week, COVID-19 was hitting the news all over the place, social media. And then the next thing you know, we've got the lockdowns, we've got travel bans, we've got event cancellations, and within weeks, working from home became the norm in this industry and every other industry where it was possible. So despite not being able to present at these industry events, I was able to meet people remotely thanks to technology. So through networking, referrals, virtual events, email introductions, and LinkedIn even, I was able to make contact with people and set up meetings to have virtual conversations. And to date, the AMGTA has grown 1,200% over when I came on board. We had 2 initial founding members when I started, and we now have 26 members representing 10 countries. And I think that's a real testament to the mission of the organization, which is, again, to promote the environmental benefits of additive manufacturing and to help our member companies advance within the industry by really helping them to do more in terms of sustainability.
Gotcha. And as part of your role, are you like doing studies, sharing information? Like, how are you educating your group?
Well, last month, because the events keep getting canceled, I hosted 2 member-only forums for members to meet one another and to discuss what it is that they're doing internally within their own company's operations or within the product and service offerings that they have to become more green, and also to discuss how we can advance the industry. And I'm planning to host, they were so successful, I'm planning to host 2 more in August and 2 more in October of this year. And we're hoping there's some more big trade shows that are still, they have not yet been canceled, later this year in September and November. And we're hoping that those come to fruition. But if they don't, we'll just continue to do our member-only forums and probably start doing presentations where our members can actually, right now they've been talking about what they do, but they haven't been doing like an official PowerPoint presentation. But we'll probably start grouping our members to do presentations to help each other get motivated, inspire, and also learn from one another and what is actually taking place and how it's working out. What are the milestones, and how are they doing in terms of coming to sorry, I'm not saying that well. How is it that they're actually getting to the goals that they've established? And in some cases, companies have been working on it for a while. In other cases, they just started. So trying to get an understanding of what's happening within each organization over time, I think, is going to be the way forward.
So who should be joining the group? Are there different kinds of members?
Well, I think the members that seem to be really in tune with what their employees, what their investors, what their customers are expecting and asking about in terms of environmental sustainability are the ones that are really excited to be a member and came on board. But there are many other companies, because of COVID, getting back to the impact of COVID, who are wanting to join, and because expenses have been cut or curtailed, they are waiting until the economy improves in order to have the funding to be able to join. So it's just been a challenge for them. But in the interim, they're watching us. So yeah, I think that's probably the key thing. And what we're looking for in terms of sustainability is we really want companies that are not just saying that they're doing things in greenwashing. We want companies that are actually taking action and that are serious about this and are committed to greening their production process or their product line so that's really the criteria we have, is that they are sincere and genuine in their interest. So there's a pre-screening, and we find that the companies that are coming on board are really using this as a marketing tool to educate their customers. And again, they use it for their employees too. A lot of employee satisfaction and morale building, to know that they're working for a company that really cares and is doing something. And then sometimes investors require it. In the European Union, we're seeing big pushes for carbon emission reductions, and that's throughout the economies there, not just additive. So those companies in the additive space are wanting to make a difference and be part of these reductions, because it's becoming a huge focus area in Europe, and we're starting to see it here in the United States.
I'm wondering if there are specific questions that, your startup and you're looking at how you can create products by using some of these perhaps unfamiliar to you processes. Are there specific questions that we should be asking if we are going into, say, a service bureau or a contract manufacturing environment, to make sure that we are seeing a sustainable process?
Yeah, there's some great resources. One of the ones I really love to recommend is Women in 3D Printing. They're a nonprofit organization, and it's a welcoming place to learn more about additive manufacturing. They have a ton of free videos. They put on several conferences, and they bring in experts, women experts from around the world, to talk about different aspects of 3D printing and additive. And so they also do networking sessions after their events, so that you can meet at tables through the remote platform and meet one another. And actually, I've gotten some great, had some great conversations and networking through the Women in 3D after their events. So it's something that I think anybody can benefit from, because those materials are out there and they're free. You don't have to be a woman to watch them. It's available to men too. So their real goal is you'll love this, Bobby, because this is really what you're all about as well with Innovation Women, is they want to have 50% women in the 3D printing industry. Right now, the current stats show 13%. They want to have 50% women in the boardroom and 50% women-owned businesses in the industry. Right now, the women business-owned is only 11%. So there's a long way to go. So their goal is to themselves out of business so that there will be no need for women in 3D printing one day when we get more balanced in representation.
Gotcha. So any specific tips or advice to share with our entrepreneurs if they're thinking potentially about additive manufacturing?
Yeah, well, I love to refer people to the video platforms, YouTube and others, for all kinds of information. If you're you want to prototype something and you want to learn about it, keyword searches, it's just phenomenal the amount of content that's there and that's free. And all the different 3D printing processes are featured. And so that's like a whole nother world. When you look at AM metal, which is 20% of the AM industry, and then polymers comprises approximately 80%, which, that adds up to 100, but there's others. So it depends which data you look at. So there's ceramics, there's sand, there's concrete, there's wood being used for 3D printing now, and lots of biocomposites, biopolymer applications as well. So there's just so much that you can learn just by experiencing these videos, and the sky's the limit. As much as you want to learn, you can learn.
Wait, before we go, I know that you guys are doing a whole bunch of research. Can you talk about that research and what you're sharing with people?
Sure, there's a lot of claims being made in additive about how green the technologies are. We know there's less waste. We know that there's local production. We know that you can lightweight, which can save fuel in aircraft and reduce emissions, et cetera, et cetera. So we're commissioning independent, ongoing, and rigorous research projects to update our members in the industry on what our eco footprint is now and what we need to focus on in the future. And the goal is to substantiate these claims. And we won't know until we get the data and metrics and exactly what it is that we can say without greenwashing. We suspect things, and we think that it's highly likely that certain things are going to be noted in the research as being advantages to additive from an environmental perspective. But when a customer asks the service bureau or the whatever type company it is, the material company, et cetera, post-processing company, how do we know that this is truly more environmentally beneficial? Can you prove it? How do you validate that? The research is for that purpose. So last June, we commissioned our first university research project through Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. And it was an academic literature review of what was already out there in terms of environmental sustainability in AM metal. We had to start somewhere. Since it was our first project, you can't do AM and polymer together. You really have to separate them out because they're so different. So this was a research paper that we published November of last year. It's for free and on our website. And it's called The State of Knowledge of the Environmental Impacts of Metal Additive Manufacturing. And what we learned from this report, key takeaways, is that while AM generally has a much higher carbon footprint per kilogram of material processed than conventional manufacturing when considering the direct manufacturing process itself. But the impacts really depend greatly on the part geometry. So if you were to take a solid cube and machine that, it would be much more environmentally lower impact, if you will, to produce it by machining than AM. But if you have a hollow or lattice structure, it would be considerably less impact to produce by additive. So the report recognizes that we need more comprehensive research, life cycle assessment, or LCAs, also known as life cycle analysis, which takes a look at a part or a product from material extraction through processing that material to actually producing what it is you're producing, the part of the product, all the way, transportation, distribution, all the way up into the useful stage of its life till it tends to get discarded at the end of its life, or possibly at some point in the future, we'll be able to reuse that material. In some cases, we're using that with AM, definitely an AM metal powder. It can be reused up to a certain point, but at some point in the future, maybe other materials could be reconfigured or refurbished in some way to be new inputs, and we would have more of a circular economy at that point. But that's generally what we learned from this, is that we need more research, which is kind of what we suspected the findings would say, because when you look at conventional manufacturing, there's tons of research on every kind of process, and every process compared to each other. So there's like a deep dive of information, but when you go into additive, it's like we're just scratching the surface. We have so much more that we can do. And so what we need to do is to consider our membership and their interests and what it is with our resources we can do to be able to advance sustainability in additive, but also taking into consideration that there's a lot of different processes and materials being used, and figuring out what makes the most sense to do first so we can have the most impact in the industry.
Gotcha. I know that a lot of people, we have a vision of 3D printing that's probably formed by the small machines that we see, homes, friend's house, the library. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, I think we think about just plastics, when it comes to 3D printing, but you mentioned all different types of materials.
Right. And aerospace, aviation, space. We've got a lot of AM metal, of course, and in the transportation automotive industry. You're also seeing it in aviation also uses polymers, plastics, and same thing with the transportation industry. So you're seeing it in several. There's quite a bit of polymers used in the medical industry for implants, but there are some metals too, certainly titanium. When you're looking at knee implants, hip implants, and spinal implants, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this convergence of these two different big areas of additive in all these different industries. So it's really quite exciting.
Great. Okay. So thank you again for joining us. A lot of the references and resources that you mentioned will be in the article below. And thank you again for joining us, Sherry Handel, Executive Director at Additive Manufacturing Green Trade Association.